The first sensation was not pain, but the cool, crisp scent of pine and loess soil, mixed with the faint aroma of sandalwood. When my eyelids fluttered open, the bright sunlight struck them, forcing me to squint. Above me stretched a sky of such vivid blue it felt like a painting, and around me stood towering, tiled-roof buildings that curved upward at the corners in elegant arcs. This was no place I recognized, yet somehow, my body felt strangely at ease. I sat up slowly, and my hand brushed against something soft and heavy. Reaching up, I realized my hair was long, tied back neatly with a simple leather cord. Looking down, I was dressed in a tunic of sturdy linen, dyed a deep indigo, with dark trousers and boots that looked worn but well cared for. At my hip hung a sword, its hilt wrapped in faded blue cloth, the scabbard carved with faint patterns of clouds and dragons. My mind was a foggy haze. I couldn't remember my name, where I came from, or how I had ended up here. Fragments of images flashed fleetingly, bright lights, strange loud noises, towering structures of stone and glass. But they vanished as quickly as they appeared, leaving no clarity behind. Yet, despite the confusion, my feet seemed to know exactly where to go. As I stood up and started walking, my legs moved with a steady, familiar stride, turning down alleyways and across bridges without hesitation. My hand naturally rested on the hilt of my sword, fingers curling around it as if it were an extension of my own arm. It felt like muscle memory, etched deep into my bones, even though my brain couldn't explain why. Along the way, I passed merchants selling silk fabrics, spice traders calling out their wares, and laborers carrying heavy loads. Every few steps, people would glance at me and nod, some with respect, others with a hint of wariness. Once, an old shopkeeper leaned toward his neighbor as I passed, and I caught the words, lone swordsman, and mercenary. As I wandered further, I stopped at a tea house to catch my breath. While sipping warm tea, I overheard two travelers talking in low voices. "Have you heard? That wandering swordsman is in town again. The one who works alone," said one. "The one who takes on the jobs no one else dares to touch?" asked the other. "I heard he never stays long, never works with anyone else. No one even knows his real name." It dawned on me then, that was who I was. A lone swordsman. Why I chose this path, or why I refused to work with others, remained a mystery. Maybe I had lost people before, or maybe it was just the way things had always been. My mind gave no answers. By nightfall, I found my way to a quiet inn near the city gate. I rented a small room, ate a simple meal of steamed buns and vegetable soup, and lay down on the hard wooden bed. Despite the lingering confusion in my mind, sleep came easily, as if I had been exhausted for days. When I awoke the next morning, something had shifted. The fog in my head had lifted a little. I could still not recall my past, but I felt sharper, more alert. The golden rays of the rising sun filtered through the paper windows, casting soft patterns across the floor. Deciding to learn more about the place I was in, and perhaps about myself, I dressed quickly and stepped out into the street. The city was already alive with activity. Vendors arranged their goods, calling out to passers-by. Carriages pulled by horses or oxen rumbled along the cobblestone roads. I walked at a leisurely pace, observing everything around me. I passed a market where artisans displayed intricate jade carvings, porcelain vases, and handcrafted weapons. A calligrapher sat on a stool, brush in hand, creating flowing characters on rice paper. Nearby, a group of children played a traditional game, laughing and chasing each other. I stopped at a stall selling maps and scrolls. Picking up a map, I scanned it. I learned I was in Chang'an, a bustling hub of culture and trade. As I stood there, a shadow fell over me. I looked up to see a man dressed in fine silk robes, accompanied by two guards. He looked me up and down, his eyes pausing briefly on the sword at my hip. "You look like a man in need of purpose," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I have a job. One that requires someone who works alone. Someone, like you." My fingers tightened slightly around the scabbard. The wealthy man in silk robes stood tall, though his eyes darted nervously as they met mine. I could sense it immediately, the subtle shift in his tone, the slight twitch of his fingers, and the faint, unnatural pitch in his voice when he spoke. I couldn't explain how, but I knew he was not telling the whole truth. "My name is Master Gao," he said, gesturing to the guards behind him. "I own several rice shops in the western district. Recently, a group of bandits has been intercepting my supply carts. I need you to remove them permanently. I will pay you 500 silver taels." "Where exactly are these bandits based?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. In the hills west of the city. They are ruthless killers. Gao replied quickly. A sharp, prickling sensation ran through my mind, the same feeling I got whenever someone lied. I narrowed my eyes. Are you sure they are just bandits? Or are they perhaps farmers protesting unfair prices, you said? Master Gao's face paled. How dare you? I don't kill innocent people, I said firmly, turning away. Find someone else. Before I had walked 10 steps, another wealthy merchant approached me. He was shorter, round-bellied, dressed in brocade silk, and wore heavy jade rings on every finger. Master Sima is the name, he said, smiling broadly, though his eyes remained cold. I heard you turned down Gao. Wise choice. He's a cheat. Now I have a real job for you. There's a man in the city prison who knows where my family's lost treasure is hidden. I need you to break in and silence him before he can tell anyone else. I will pay you 1,000 silver taels. Again, the warning sensation buzzed in my head. I looked him straight in the eye. The prisoner is a witness in a corruption case against you, isn't he? You want him dead because he speaks the truth. Master Sima's smile vanished instantly. You insolent rogue, do you know who I am? I know enough, I replied, hand resting on my sword. And I know you are lying. I will not be your executioner. I continued my walk through the market, trying to clear my head. The morning sun was higher now, and the crowds grew denser. Not long after, a third wealthy man appeared, this one dressed in official robes, with a jade pendant signifying government rank. He had a stern face and walked with heavy authority. I am Prefect Lu, he said, without any preamble. There is a group of rebels hiding in the southern woods. They plan to attack the city. I need you to lead my men and wipe them out. No survivors. The court will reward you handsomely. This time, the feeling was stronger than ever. It wasn't just a partial lie, it was a fabrication woven from start to finish. Rebels? I asked. Or are they villagers who refuse to give you their land? You call them rebels to justify slaughtering them. Prefect Lu's expression darkened. You dare accuse a government official? I could have you arrested. Try, I said, gripping my sword handle. But I promise you, you won't like the result. He glared at me for a long moment before turning and storming away with his guards. Shaking my head, I moved toward the quieter edge of the market, feeling frustrated. Was this all people thought I was? A weapon to be hired for murder? Then, a soft, trembling voice interrupted my thoughts. Sir, please. I turned around to see an elderly woman kneeling on the ground. Her clothes were tattered and patched, her face lined with age and worry. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Please, you are the lone swordsman, aren't you? She begged, bowing her head low. Please help me. My son, my only son, he was taken by the Black Tiger gang 3 days ago. They said they will sell him as a slave in the south unless I pay them a fortune I don't have. They are monsters. They kidnap children, rob travelers, and kill anyone who stands in their way. Please, I have nowhere else to turn. There was no buzz, no warning, no feeling of deceit. Her words rang true, pure and desperate. This was the kind of job I could accept. Please stand up, I said gently, helping her to her feet. Tell me everything you know about this gang. I will bring your son back safely. After listening carefully to the old woman's story, I learned that the Black Tiger gang operated from an abandoned temple hidden in the bamboo forest outside the city walls. They were known for their cruelty and had strong ties with some corrupt officials, which explained why no one had been able to stop them. I waited until dusk to leave the city. Wearing my indigo tunic and with my sword strapped securely to my side, I moved silently through the city gates. The guards glanced at me but didn't stop me. Perhaps they knew better than to interfere with a lone swordsman. The bamboo forest was dark and quiet, save for the rustling of leaves in the wind. I followed the narrow path I had been told about, my steps light and steady. My body seemed to know exactly how to move without making a sound, as if I had done this hundreds of times before. When I was close to the temple, I slowed down and hid behind a cluster of thick bamboo stalks. From here, I could see the building clearly. It was old and weathered, with broken statues and cracked walls. Several torches burned outside, casting long, flickering shadows. Rough-looking men armed with spears and sabers patrolled the perimeter. I spotted a small window near the back of the temple. It was unguarded, but high above the ground. Taking a deep breath, I leaped upward, my muscles reacting instinctively. I grabbed the window ledge and pulled myself up without making a noise. Peering inside, I saw a long corridor lined with wooden doors. As I dropped quietly into the corridor, I heard voices coming from one of the rooms. I crept closer and listened. "Old one said the boy's mother has no money," a gruff voice said. "We should just sell him tomorrow. The merchant from Ling'an is coming at dawn." "Yeah, and if anyone asks, we'll say he was an orphan we picked up." Another man laughed. "No one dares to question us anyway." My grip tightened around the hilt of my sword. These people were not just criminals, they were heartless monsters. I couldn't let them succeed. Suddenly, the door opened, and one of the gang members stepped out. He spotted me immediately and froze. "Intruder!" he shouted, reaching for his weapon. There was no time for hesitation. I drew my sword in a single fluid motion. The blade glinted in the dim light as I deflected his strike and counterattacked. My movements were fast and precise, guided by that mysterious muscle memory. I disarmed him quickly, knocking him unconscious with the hilt of my sword, making sure not to cause permanent harm. But the shout had already alerted the others. Heavy footsteps echoed from all directions as more gang members rushed toward me. The narrow corridor quickly filled with armed men. They were rough and undisciplined, but there were many of them, and they fought with wild ferocity. "Take him down! He's just one man!" shouted a burly man with a scar across his face, likely the local leader. They charged at me all at once. I stepped back, positioning myself so that they couldn't surround me easily. My sword moved like an extension of my arm, parrying blows and striking back only when necessary. I tried my best not to kill. These men were criminals, but they were still human. I aimed for their weapons or limbs, disabling them without taking their lives. However, they didn't share my morals. They swung their blades with deadly intent, aiming for my throat and heart. I had to stay alert. One man lunged at me with a spear. I sidestepped quickly, grabbed the shaft of the spear, and pulled him forward, causing him to crash into his comrades. Another swung a heavy axe, which I blocked with my sword. The impact sent vibrations up my arm, but I held firm. The battle was intense. The air was filled with the sound of clashing metal, shouting, and groans. Sweat dripped down my forehead, and my breath came in short gasps, but my mind remained clear. I knew exactly what I was doing, even though I couldn't remember learning these skills. Just as I thought I had dealt with most of them, the scar-faced leader stepped forward, wielding a massive iron saber. He was larger and stronger than the others, and his movements were more skilled. "Or good," he grunted, swinging his saber in a wide arc. "But you're foolish to stand in our way." I blocked his attack, but the force pushed me back several steps. "You are the foolish ones," I replied. "Kidnapping innocent children and destroying lives. This ends tonight." We exchanged several blows, each one harder than the last. His saber was heavy and powerful, but my sword was lighter and more agile. I looked for an opening, but he guarded himself well. Then I noticed he favored his right leg slightly, perhaps an old injury. When he swung his saber again, I ducked low and swept my leg toward his. He stumbled, losing his balance for a split second. It was all I needed. I struck the hilt of my sword against his temple, knocking him unconscious. As he fell to the ground, the remaining gang members hesitated. Seeing their leader defeated, they began to retreat, scrambling away in fear. I didn't chase them. My priority was finding the boy. Quickly searched the temple until I found a small, locked room in the basement. Breaking the lock open, I stepped inside. There, huddled in the corner, was a young boy, no older than 10. He looked terrified, his clothes dirty and torn. "Don't be afraid," I said softly, sheathing my sword. "I'm here to take you back to your mother." The boy looked up at me with wide eyes. "You really will?" "I promise," I said, extending my hand. He took it hesitantly, and I led him out of the dark room and back into the cool night air. By the time we reached the city gates, the sky was already turning gray with the approaching dawn. The boy, whose name was Xiao Ming, walked beside me, holding onto my hand tightly. We didn't speak much, but I could feel his fears slowly fading away. When we arrived at the old woman's small house in the poorest district of the city, she was already waiting outside. Upon seeing Xiao Ming, she burst into tears and ran to embrace him. "Xiao Ming! My child!" she cried, holding him so tightly I thought she might hurt him. "I thought I'd never see you again." "Mother!" the boy cried, burying his face in her shoulder. I stood back, watching them with a strange feeling of warmth spreading through my chest. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced since waking up in this strange world. "Thank you, sir," the old woman said, turning to me and bowing repeatedly. "Thank you so much. You have saved my whole world. Please take this." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a few copper coins. "It's not much, but it's all I have." I gently pushed her hand away. "Keep it. You need it more than I do. Just promise me you'll both stay safe." As I walked away from their house, I couldn't help but think about the 3 wealthy men who had approached me earlier. Why had they chosen me specifically for those jobs? And why did I have this ability to detect lies? I decided to investigate. My instincts told me there was a connection between them. First, I went back to the market area where I had met them. I asked around, talking to shopkeepers and street vendors, using my ability to tell who was being honest and who was hiding something. Slowly, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Master Gao, the rice merchant, was hoarding grain and selling it at inflated prices. The people he called bandits were actually farmers who had tried to stop his carts to demand fair prices. He had wanted me to kill them to eliminate the competition and silence the opposition. Master Sima, the brocade merchant, had been smuggling illegal goods and evading taxes for years. The prisoner he wanted me to kill was his former accountant, who had decided to turn him in to the authorities. Sima had wanted to silence him before he could testify. Prefect Liu, the government official, was seizing land from villagers to build his own private estate. The people he called rebels were villagers who refused to leave their homes. He had wanted me to lead an attack on them to clear the land without getting his own hands dirty. And what was more shocking, all 3 of them were working together. They were part of a corrupt network that controlled much of the city's trade and government affairs. They had heard about me, the mysterious lone mercenary, and thought I would be the perfect tool to carry out their dirty work. They believed that since I had no known background, I wouldn't ask questions and wouldn't care about the consequences. They thought I was just a sword for hire. But they were wrong. Standing on the city wall, looking out over the vast expanse of Chang'an, I felt a mix of anger and determination. I now understood why those jobs had felt so wrong, because they were rooted in greed, corruption, and injustice. But I also realized something important. Even though I didn't know who I was or where I came from, I knew who I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be a weapon for the powerful and corrupt. I was going to use my skills and my ability to help those who couldn't help themselves. However, I also knew that these 3 men wouldn't just give up. They were powerful and dangerous, and they would likely try to find someone else to do their bidding. Or even come after me for refusing them. I needed to be careful. As I walked back toward the inn where I was staying, I thought about what I should do next. I couldn't just expose them directly. They had too much influence, and without solid evidence, no one would believe me. But I couldn't just let them continue their evil deeds either. Suddenly, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw a young man dressed in official servant clothes running toward me. "Sir! Please wait!" he called out. When he reached me, he bowed quickly, looking nervous. "I was sent by Prefect Liu. Since you refused his offer, he is very angry. He says you are a threat to the city's safety and has ordered your arrest. There are soldiers coming to the inn to get you right now. I just wanted to warn you. I know you're not a bad man." I looked at him carefully. There was no buzz, no feeling of deceit. He was telling the truth. "Thank you," I said, bowing slightly. "But why are you helping me? You could get in trouble." He looked around nervously. "Because I know what Prefect Liu is doing. He hurt my family too. I want someone to stop him. But I don't have the courage to do it myself." "You already have more courage than you think," I said. "Thank you for the warning." As the young man hurried away, I knew I had to leave the inn immediately. But I wasn't going to run away from Chang'an. Not yet. I had a new purpose now. I would gather evidence against these corrupt men, expose their crimes, and make sure they faced justice. It wouldn't be easy, and it would be dangerous, but it was the right thing to do. The moon hung low over Chang'an, casting long, pale shadows across the quiet streets. I had spent the day piecing together evidence against Master Gao. I talked to farmers, followed his supply carts, and documented how he bought grain cheaply during harvest time and hoarded it until prices skyrocketed. I also found out that the people he called bandits were just villagers trying to feed their starving families. On this night, I slipped out of the inn after midnight, wrapped in a dark cloak to blend into the darkness. I moved silently through the streets, avoiding the occasional patrol of guards, until I reached Master Gao's grand residence in the wealthy district. The compound was surrounded by high brick walls, with heavy wooden gates and lanterns hanging above them. 2 guards stood watch outside, but they looked sleepy and inattentive. I didn't bother with the main entrance. Instead, I leaped lightly onto the wall, using my sword hilt to steady myself, and dropped down into the inner courtyard. The place was quiet, with only the sound of crickets breaking the silence. I navigated through the gardens and corridors, relying on the rough map I'd drawn from what I'd learned from the locals, until I found Master Gao's private study at the back of the house. It was the largest room, lit by a single candle still burning inside. I pushed the door open slowly. It creaked softly, but not enough to wake the whole house. Master Gao was sitting behind his large wooden desk, counting stacks of silver taels by candlelight. He looked up in shock as I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Who are you?" he stammered, dropping the silver coins on the table. "Guards! Help! Your guards won't hear you," I said, my voice low and cold. I pulled back my cloak, revealing my face and the sword at my hip. I drew the blade halfway out of its scabbard. The metal gleamed in the dim light, casting a sharp reflection on Master Gao's terrified face. "You remember me, don't you? The insolent rogue who refused your job." Master Gao's face turned pale. Sweat dripped down his forehead. You're here to kill me?" "I don't kill unless I have to," I replied, stepping closer and slamming the tip of my sword lightly onto his desk, just inches from his hand. He flinched violently. "But I am here to collect something. I know all about your tricks, hoarding grain, cheating farmers, calling innocent people bandits so you can have them killed. I want the ledgers, the ones showing your real profits and the deals you made with corrupt officials." I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but I could feel the lie radiating off him. I pushed my sword a little harder against the desk, making a scratched mark on the wood. "Don't lie to me. I can always tell. And right now, you're lying very loudly. If you don't give me what I want, I'll make sure everyone in Chang'an knows exactly what you've done. And believe me, what I tell them will be much worse than what you think I'll do to you tonight." Master Gao trembled all over. He looked at the sword, then at me, and finally slumped back in his chair. Fine. The ledgers are in the cabinet behind me. The 3rd shelf. Hidden behind a false panel." He stood up shakily and walked to the cabinet. As he reached for the panel, I kept my sword pointed at him, watching his every move. He pulled out a stack of thick books bound in leather and threw them onto the desk. "Take them," he spat, though his voice was still shaking. "Just leave me alone." I flipped through the pages quickly. The entries were detailed, with dates, amounts, and names of people he'd bribed or cheated. It was exactly what I needed. "Thank you," I said, tucking the ledgers into my cloak. "And remember, if you try to destroy anything or run away, I'll be back. Next time, I won't be so polite." Before he could reply, I slipped out of the room the same way I'd come in, vanishing into the night. I could hear Master Gao breathing heavily behind me, terrified out of his wits. The next day, I set my sights on Master Sima. Unlike Master Gao, who kept his records in his home, Sima was smarter, or thought he was. He stored most of his important documents in a heavily guarded warehouse near the river, where he kept his imported goods and smuggled items. He claimed it was for safety, but in reality, it was so he could access them easily while keeping them away from prying eyes. I had learned from my sources that Sima often went there late at night to check on his stock and review his accounts. And sure enough, when I arrived near the warehouse around midnight, I saw his personal carriage parked outside. The building was large, made of stone and timber, with barred windows and 2 heavy iron doors. 4 guards patrolled the perimeter, carrying torches and spears. I waited in the shadows of a nearby boat dock until the guards turned their backs, then slipped quietly toward the back of the building. There was a small window there, used for ventilation. It was high up, but with a quick jump and a push off the wall, I reached it and pulled myself up. The bars were thin and rusted. With a sharp twist using my sword as leverage, I managed to bend them enough to squeeze through. I landed softly on a pile of silk and cotton bales inside. The warehouse was dimly lit by a few oil lamps hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled of spices, fabric, and dust. I could hear voices coming from the front section. Moving silently between the stacks of goods, I made my way toward the sound. Master Sima was standing near a large wooden table, talking to one of his assistants. On the table were piles of documents, scrolls, and a set of scales. "Make sure this shipment goes out before dawn," he said, pointing at a list. "And don't forget to mark it as textiles on the customs form. We don't want anyone knowing there are rare antiques inside." "Yes, Master Sima," the assistant replied. As the assistant turned to leave, I stepped out from behind a stack of crates. The man froze when he saw me. I put a finger to my lips and shook my head. He nodded quickly, looking terrified, and hurried past me toward the door. Master Sima turned around, frowning. "What's taking so long?" He stopped dead when he saw me. I was standing just a few feet away, my sword drawn and resting casually in my hand. The blade caught the light of the lamps, casting a cold glow over the room. "You," he gasped, stumbling back until he hit the table. "How did you get in here?" "Guards. Guards. Your guards are busy patrolling the outside," I said, taking a step forward. "And your assistant won't be coming back any time soon. We need to talk, Master Sima. About your business, smuggling, tax evasion, bribing officials, and trying to have an innocent man killed in prison just to save your own skin." "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, though his voice shook. He tried to reach for a small dagger hidden in his belt, but I was faster. I swung my sword toward him, stopping the blade just an inch from his throat. He froze, his eyes wide with terror. "Don't try anything stupid," I warned. "I can cut you down before you even touch that dagger. Now, where are the real records? The ones that show exactly what you've been doing. I know you don't keep everything in the main office. You keep the important stuff here." I can't give them to you," he stammered. "If I do, I'll be ruined." "You're already ruined," I said, pushing the sword a tiny bit closer. A drop of blood appeared on his neck. He winced. "Unless you want me to cut through your lies and your throat at the same time, give me what I want. Or do you want me to tell everyone about how you sold fake medicine to the poor, making them sick just so you could make more money?" He stared at me, trembling violently, and finally nodded. "Fine. Fine. They're in the iron chest under the table. The key is in my pocket." He reached into his pocket slowly, pulled out a small brass key, and handed it to me. I kept my sword pointed at him while I knelt down and unlocked the chest. Inside were bundles of documents, letters, and receipts, all neatly organized. I flipped through them quickly. They included records of illegal shipments, lists of bribes paid to officials, and even letters from Prefect Liu himself discussing their joint business deals. "Perfect," I said, tucking the documents into my cloak. "You've been very helpful, Master Sima. Now, don't even think about trying to destroy anything or run away. I have enough evidence here to put you in prison for the rest of your life. If you behave yourself, maybe I'll consider not adding more charges later. But if you cause any trouble, well, you know what I'm capable of." I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on him until I reached the door. Then I slipped out, leaving him standing there, shaking like a leaf. I knew he wouldn't sleep soundly for a long time. Prefect Liu was different from the other two. He was a government official, powerful and arrogant, with guards and soldiers at his beck and call. He wouldn't be as easily scared by a midnight visit, and trying to break into his heavily guarded residence would be too risky. He was also smarter and more careful with his records, keeping most of them locked in official archives or hidden in places no one could easily access. So I decided to take a different approach, one that was more psychological and much more wicked. First, I gathered information about his daily routine. I learned that every morning, he would leave his residence in a large official carriage and travel to the government office, passing through the main market street. He always had a large escort of soldiers and guards, making it impossible to approach him directly. But I didn't need to approach him. I just needed to get inside his head. For 3 days in a row, I appeared in places where he could see me, but always just out of reach. The first day, I stood on the roof of a tea house overlooking the street, watching his carriage pass. I was wearing my usual indigo tunic, with my sword clearly visible at my hip. I didn't do anything, I just stood there, staring at him. But I could see through the carriage window that he had spotted me. He leaned forward, his face looking confused and alarmed. The second day, I was standing by the bridge he had to cross every day. As his carriage approached, I leaned casually against the railing, cleaning my sword with a piece of cloth. Again, I just looked at him. This time, I could see him shouting at his guards, pointing at me, but by the time they reached me, I had already vanished into the crowd. The third day, I went further. I slipped into the government office complex early in the morning, disguised as a delivery worker. I left a small package on his desk, wrapped in plain paper. Inside, I placed a single sheet of paper with just one sentence written on it. I know about the land you stole and the people you hurt. No name, no signature. Then I left quickly. That evening, I went to his private residence. This time, I didn't break in. I stood outside the main gate, hidden in the shadows. As he came out of the house to check the guards, I threw a small stone against the wall near him. He jumped, looking around wildly. I called out in a low voice from the darkness, loud enough for him to hear but soft enough that the guards wouldn't catch it clearly. The villagers are waiting. And so am I. Prefect Lu was already on edge from the past few days. The sight of me appearing everywhere, the mysterious note, and now the voice from the darkness finally pushed him over the edge. He started shouting at his guards, ordering them to search everywhere, to find whoever was behind this. But I was already gone. That night, I learned from one of my contacts, a clerk who worked in the office, that Prefect Lu had become paranoid. He was checking and rechecking his documents, burning some of them but hiding others in different places. He was terrified that someone was about to expose him. And that was exactly what I wanted. 2 nights later, I approached one of his trusted assistants, a man named Chin who had once been a farmer himself before Lu took his family's land. I found him drinking alone in a small tavern. I sat down opposite him, showed him the evidence I had collected about Lu's crimes, and told him I knew he wasn't happy working for such a corrupt man. At first, he was scared. But when I told him I wasn't going to hurt him and that I wanted to help expose Lu, he finally agreed to help. He told me where Lu kept his most important records, hidden in a secret compartment behind a large painting in his private study. That night, while Prefect Lu was busy attending a banquet outside the city, Chen let me into the residence through a side gate. I slipped into the study, found the compartment exactly where Chen had said, and took out the documents. They included official orders signed by Lu, land deeds marked with false signatures, and letters proving that he had been working together with Gao and Sima all along. When I left the residence, I left nothing behind, but I knew that Prefect Lu would be wondering for a long time what I had found and what I was going to do with it. Unlike Gao and Sima, I hadn't threatened him directly. I had let his own fear and paranoia do the work for me. And that, I knew, was much more effective. Now I had all the evidence I needed. The ledgers from Master Gao, the documents from Master Sima, and the records from Prefect Lu all together painted a clear picture of their crimes, how they had worked together to cheat, steal, and hurt innocent people just to make themselves rich and powerful. But I couldn't just hand them over to any official. I needed someone honest and trustworthy. From what I'd learned from the locals and my own observations, the only one who fit that description was Lord Meng, the Imperial Inspector. He was one of the highest-ranking officials in Chang'an, known for being fair and just, and he had been trying to clean up the corruption in the city for years. But because Gao, Sima, and Lu had so much influence, he hadn't been able to find enough evidence to take action against them. On a rainy night, I went to Lord Meng's residence. It was a large but simple building, not as grand as the homes of the wealthy merchants or Prefect Lu. I didn't knock on the door. Instead, I climbed over the wall and slipped into the courtyard. I found his private study, where he was working late at night, reviewing official documents. I knocked softly on the window. He looked up, surprised. I pushed the window open slightly and tossed the bundle of evidence onto his desk. Before he could speak, I said in a low voice, "Lord Meng, these are the proof of the crimes committed by Master Gao, Master Sima, and Prefect Lu. Everything is there, their deals, their bribes, the people they hurt. I've also added a list of witnesses who are willing to speak up. I know you're a good man, and I trust you to do the right thing. But be careful, they have many people working for them, and they won't give up easily." Lord Meng stood up and walked to the window. He looked at the bundle of documents, then at me. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm just someone who doesn't like seeing innocent people suffer," I replied. "And someone who believes that justice should be served." "Will you come forward as a witness?" he asked. "Your testimony would help a lot." I shook my head. "No. I need to leave Chang'an, but I'll be watching. If you don't do what you promised, or if you let them go, I'll be back. And next time, I won't be so nice." Lord Meng nodded slowly. "I understand. And thank you?" I promise you, I will make sure justice is done. I closed the window and slipped away into the rainy night. I knew I could trust him. There was no lie in his voice, no deceit in his eyes. A week later, the news spread throughout Chang'an like wildfire. Master Gao, Master Sima, and Prefect Lu had all been arrested. Lord Ming had gathered enough evidence and witnesses to charge them with multiple crimes: corruption, fraud, kidnapping, theft, and abuse of power. Their properties were seized, their assets confiscated, and they were sent to prison to await trial. During the week, while the legal proceedings were underway and news spread across Chang'an, the fate of the Black Tiger Gang was also decided. It turned out that the gang had long been operating under Prefect Lu's protection. In exchange for sharing part of their illegal profits and carrying out special tasks, such as silencing troublemakers or intimidating villagers, Lu had turned a blind eye to their crimes, even tipping them off about patrol routes and investigations. This secret alliance was clearly documented in the letters and ledgers I had handed over to Lord Ming. When Lord Ming launched the crackdown on the three powerful men, he also issued orders to raid the abandoned temple stronghold in the bamboo forest. This time, it was not just me acting alone, but a well-organized team of government soldiers and officers. However, the gang did not surrender easily. When the troops arrived, the bandits, led by their scar-faced leader who had regained consciousness and fled back to the hideout, fought back fiercely. They were armed and desperate, knowing that with Lu's protection gone, they had nowhere to run. A violent battle broke out amidst the bamboo trees and crumbling temple walls. Some of the bandits chose to fight to the death, refusing to be taken alive, and fell during the clash. Others, seeing that they were outnumbered and outmatched, dropped their weapons and gave up. By the end of the operation, most of the surviving gang members were arrested and shackled. They were brought back to Chang'an to face trial alongside Master Gao, Master Sima, and Prefect Lu. The evidence found in the temple, combined with the documents proving their connection to Lu, sealed their fate. They were charged with kidnapping, robbery, assault, and collaboration with corrupt officials, and were sentenced accordingly, some to long years in prison, others to hard labor in remote border regions. With the gang dismantled and their protectors brought to justice, the roads outside Chang'an finally became safer. Villagers no longer had to fear being attacked or having their children taken away, and the people could once again travel and trade without living in constant terror. According to the law, the three would likely face long prison sentences or even exile. The people of Chang'an celebrated in the streets, grateful that these corrupt men were finally being punished. I watched the celebrations from a distance, standing on the city wall. It felt good to know that I had made a difference, even if no one knew it was me. But now, it was time for me to leave. Chang'an had given me answers, but it had also given me new questions. I still didn't know who I was or where I came from. My past was still a blank page, and there was still a whole world out there waiting for me to explore. That evening, I packed my few belongings, strapped my sword to my hip, and walked out of the inn. I passed through the busy streets one last time, watching the people laughing and talking, enjoying their newfound peace. I stopped by the small house where Xiao Ming and his mother lived. They were sitting outside, eating dinner. When they saw me, they stood up and bowed. "Thank you again, sir," the woman said, tears in her eyes. "You have saved our lives." Xiao Ming ran up to me and grabbed my hand. "Will you come back and visit us?" he asked. I smiled and knelt down beside him. "Maybe one day," I said. "But right now, I have a long road ahead of me. You be a good boy and take care of your mother, all right?" Xiao Ming nodded vigorously, though his eyes glistened. "I will. And when you come back, I'll be big and strong, just like you." I patted his shoulder gently, then stood up and bowed to his mother. She bowed back, pressing her hands together as if in prayer. "May the gods watch over you, kind swordsman, wherever you go." With one last nod, I turned and walked away, not looking back. I didn't want them to see the faint trace of sadness that might have appeared on my face. I made my way toward the city gates. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The gates were still open, and travelers were coming and going, carts rumbling, voices calling out to one another. No one paid me much attention now. I was just another traveler, another face in the crowd. I adjusted the strap of my bundle and rested my hand on the hilt of my sword. The road ahead stretched far into the distance, winding through fields and hills, disappearing into the horizon. I didn't know exactly where it would lead me, or what I would find along the way.